It's always great to be invited as a guest on someone else's content, be it a webinar, a podcast, a live stream, for example. It presents a great marketing opportunity for you, but it also takes up a lot of your time, so you want to make sure that you make the most of it. In this episode, let's look at ways you can repurpose your guest appearances. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Content 10x podcast. I'm Amy Woods, the founder and CEO of Content 10x, and in this episode I want to look at ways that you can repurpose and really maximize your guest appearance on someone else's content, be it a podcast, a virtual event, a webinar, a live stream, to name a few examples. Now, it's always an honor to be asked to share your expertise with someone else's audience, but it's also time consuming and we're all busy people. So we need to put our content repurposing hat on and work out how we can get a return from it. In this episode, I'm going to cover the steps to take before your guest appearances, 11 ways to repurpose content from your guest appearances, and how to create new content around it. Now, great news, you don't need to be scribbling down lots of notes as you listen along, or you don't need to listen in again when the time comes and you are asked to appear on someone else's content, because we've got you covered. Alongside this episode, we have developed a handy, free, downloadable PDF called The Ultimate Guide to Repurposing Your Guest Appearance Content, which you'll find at content10x.com/repurpose appearance. It's got everything we talk about in this episode and more. Okay, so we're talking all about repurposing your guest appearances on someone else's content. There are lots of ways that you can be asked to provide your expert input, whether it's on a podcast episode, a webinar, or a guest on a panel, for example. Maybe you're asked to join a LinkedIn Live or speak at a virtual event or be interviewed on a YouTube channel. Firstly, just to say congrats, because when these requests come in, it means that you're positioning yourself as an expert and it's clearly working. I always remember the very first time that I got invited onto a podcast to be interviewed about content repurposing. It was on Janet Murray's podcast called Soulful PR at the time. She's subsequently renamed her podcast, but it was Soulful PR at the time. And I was absolutely delighted and, to be honest, a little bit nervous as well. But then fast forward to today, and I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've been on podcasts and live streams and webinars and virtual events and so on. And all of this is because of the content I create. So never underestimate the benefits of content. And secondly, if you are invited to be interviewed as a guest on someone else's content, we have a free guide called The Ultimate Guide to Impactful Video Interviews. You can go grab a copy of this at content10x.com/interview guide, and I'll put the link in the show notes to it as well. Now, this free guide is massively helpful to anyone new to being interviewed on podcasts, etc. And to those who have done it before, it's always great to run through the best practices and handy tips. It has information and tips and checklists on how to prepare for a good interview, including environmental checks, how to deliver a clear message, and the tech setup as well. So do go and check that out when you've done listening to this episode. It's at content10x.com/interview guide. Okay, so I spoke about this week's topic in a now very old blog post called 5 Ways to Repurpose Your Guest Appearances, which you can find at content10x.com/99. But I thought it was definitely time that we revisited this topic because there are lots more to consider and many more opportunities these days. So let's start from the moment you agree to appear on the show or webinar or whatever it is. So you agree to take part in someone else's content. You want to ask the organiser what assets you'll receive after the interview is done. Will they provide you with anything at all? Maybe it'll be the whole video, or will you just get audio? Will they be repurposing the interview themselves? And if they do, will you be able to get any of the assets for your own personal use? These are all really important questions to ask up front, because you don't want to finish and realise that you should have asked in advance or you should have actually prepared. your own video or audio version of the content. So once you know what you'll be receiving, you need to ask about permissions. Of course, most people will be happy for you to use and repurpose the content in your own way. After all, it's all good publicity for their content. But there might be some guidance on how that needs to be done, so make sure you are clued up on all of that. For example, when we have guests on this podcast and also on our other podcast, B2B Content Strategist, we always provide the guests with repurposed social media videos and graphics and copy from the interview and let them know that they are under no obligation at all to use it, but we would really be appreciative if they did. So just find out what you will be getting. We always say that as a guest, you need to know what you're going to get and you need to know that you've got permission to use it as well. Now, personally, for me, if I'm being asked to take part in something and it's actually going to take up quite a bit of my time and I'm not going to be paid as well to do so, then what might actually swing me to say yes, as opposed to I'm really sorry, but it's a no, I can't get involved in this, may well be how much content I can create off the back of my investment of time. So this is all really important. But when you get content, what do you do with it? Well, of course, you repurpose and distribute, but into what and how? So let's move on to the ways that you can repurpose this interview content because it has so much potential. Here are my 11 repurposing opportunities that are my constant go-tos. So firstly, you are going to want to create videos for social media. So that's for Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram Reels and Stories, whatever platforms that you focus on. So if you get video content from your interview, take the best bits, edit them down and add captions and titles and any branding that you're required to include as well. Make sure the videos that you create look native for each platform and add value. This is the kind of content that you might get given by the content owner to share if they create this kind of content themselves. Okay, so you might get this, but if not, if you're given the whole video, repurpose into social media videos. Then number 2, if you don't have the video, but you do have the audio, then you can make audiograms. In fact, even if you do have the video, you can still create audiograms. I guess that would depend on how much you like yourself on video. In case you're not familiar, an audiogram is when you take the audio and pair it with an image, quite often with an animated waveform and captions too. So it's a short little video, but only playing audio and a static image. So that's number 2. If you get audio, maybe create some audiograms. Number 3, building on from what I just said. If you have the audio of your talk, of your presentation, of your interview, and you have a podcast, then you might want to share your interview or parts of your interview on your own podcast. Now, obviously, it depends if the host wants to let you do this. They may not want to, but I do know people who have done this before. And with that episode in particular on your podcast, you would introduce it by saying, in this episode, I'm going to share my interview on such and such podcast, or I'm going to share a section of my interview from my appearance on the XYZ podcast. Perhaps that is the best idea. So to share a section of your content, whether it's an interview or panel discussion or presentation, and then you could add some extra commentary and additional thoughts on that particular topic. It's hard to imagine that the content owner wouldn't let you share a small amount of the episode, if not the whole one, because of course you're then promoting their episode and their content on your platform. But again, it's all about asking permission and making sure that you can do this. Then number 4, you can create a highlights video trailer where you edit together sections from your guest appearance into a trailer. And if you've done a lot of guest appearances, then you can create a bit of a show reel where you compile a few clips from different videos, for example, clips from you on podcasts and webinars and live streams. And that could be great for YouTube or your own personal brand website, as well as for social media content in general. And then if you want to get booked to appear on more shows and more content, then the call to action for this show reel highlights video trailer can be how to book you, how to get in touch and the kind of topics you like to present on and talk about. Okay, so number 4, create that highlights video trailer, bringing together different clips from your appearances on different types of content. And just a reminder, I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Do head to content10x.com/repurpose appearance to download our great new guide on exactly what I'm talking about now. So the 11 ways to repurpose your guest appearance. It's just a super handy guide that goes alongside this episode. Okay, so number 5 is to take your greatest learning points and impactful quotes and create a series of scroll-stopping quote images. These can be really eye-catching and provide bite-sized insight into your ideas and discussion points. This is definitely the kind of content that you often get provided by the content owner. So this could be something that you get given after you've appeared, but otherwise think about creating this kind of content yourself from your guest appearance. And then number 6, there is the opportunity to create an image carousel, for example, for Instagram or for LinkedIn. Use some of those quote graphics and include other great shots and impactful moments. Carousels are great because they help you create more of a story. Now, I looked at the LinkedIn algorithm report for 2022, which I'll link to in the show notes, and it reported the most effective number of slides in a LinkedIn carousel is 7. No particular reason was stated as such, but they did their research and that's what they found, so certainly good to know. And like I said, I'll link to this really handy LinkedIn algorithm report in our show notes for this episode. Then number 7, take the copy from that carousel and write up an engaging Twitter thread that really captures readers in the first tweet and keeps them interested right until the last tweet. No doubt you'll be able to get more than one thread from your interview or your guest appearance, so don't limit yourself. See if you can write some Twitter threads from that guest appearance. Then number 8, it's easy to overlook text-only social media posts, but don't, because they can be impactful and they are highly engaged with. Use the content from your guest appearance and write up some LinkedIn posts, some tweets from your interview, and all those text-only posts that you can create. Talking about text, number 9 is to write a blog post or article. So you could transcribe it and then you could share a transcript if you wanted, but much better would be to take the key learning points and discussion points and turn that into a blog post or article for your own website or for websites like Medium, or perhaps create a LinkedIn article. You could also consider writing a best of blog post, which would be a great idea for anyone who regularly appears on other people's podcasts or webinars or live streams. So wait until you've done a few and then write a summary of all of your different conversations and appearances in one roundup blog post. And then another thought, so number 10, if you do regularly appear on other people's content as an expert, perhaps you could repurpose assets from those interviews into part of a course or membership. So if you have an online course already or you have an online membership, and then you've done some brilliant, really detailed interviews on topics that form part of that course or that membership, then maybe you could include some of that or all of that content as extra content in your course or membership. And then last but not least, so number 11, dare I say it, but you can also create some new content around it. So it's not only about repurposing what you've got, but create some new content around this guest appearance. So film some Instagram stories or some TikTok, so some good old behind the scenes content. Write up a few LinkedIn posts about your appearance to get people interested and point them in the direction of this content. This is something that the team and I often do in order to promote my upcoming talks, my upcoming podcast interviews and webinars and other guest appearances. So we'll create content about them that goes into our newsletter and that we'll share on social media as well. So just think about that additional new content that you can create based on the fact that you are doing this guest appearance on someone else's content. So there you have it. There's 11 ways to repurpose your guest appearance on someone else's content. I do hope that this has been really, really helpful. I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. So do head to content10x.com/repurpose-appearance because you can download our great new guide that we created that goes alongside this episode, and it covers those 11 ways to repurpose your guest appearances. It's got everything you need in that one handy document. So next time anyone asks you to take part in their content, to come on their webinar, to go on their podcast, to be interviewed on their YouTube channel, whatever it may be, you can confidently say yes, knowing you are going to repurpose it into lots of valuable content, and you'll have our handy free download next to you to help you do that. As always, if you want help with your content repurposing, then head to content10x.com. We offer a fully done for you content repurposing service for B2B businesses. So as I said, go to our website, go to content10x.com, look at the services page, look at some of our case studies to see what we do and see if we might be able to help you. Okay, so that's a wrap for this week's episode. I hope you found it super useful. All that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.